The night sky over London, usually a tapestry of darkness punctuated by twinkling stars, was ablaze with a terrifying, fiery glow. It was September 2nd, 1666. The Great Fire of London had begun. Flames danced with wild abandon, their orange tongues licking hungrily at the night sky. A crimson glow reflected on the River Thames, an eerie spectacle that spoke of the unfolding devastation. The air crackled with the roar of the inferno, a deafening symphony of destruction. The fire, a monstrous entity, spread with relentless speed, devouring everything in its path. Wooden houses, their timbers dried by an unusually hot summer, became instant torches. Narrow, winding streets acted like chimneys, funneling the fire onward in a terrifying cascade. Panic seized the city. The streets, usually bustling with commerce and life, were now choked with terrified citizens fleeing for their lives. The cries of mothers searching for lost children pierced the air, their pleas lost in the roar of the flames. The fire showed no mercy, consuming everything in its wake with an insatiable hunger. This was not just a fire, it was a city-devouring monster, leaving behind a trail of ash and despair. The Great Fire of London, a disaster etched in history, began not with a roar but with a whisper. A tiny spark, insignificant in itself, ignited in the bakery of Thomas Fariner on Pudding Lane. It was just past midnight. The ovens had been extinguished, or so it was thought. Perhaps a stray ember, glowing unnoticed in the ashes, had come back to life. Or a rat, scurrying through the bakery, had knocked over a lit candle. Whatever the cause, the spark found its fuel. Dry flour, stacked in sacks, ignited like tinder. Flames erupted, licking at the wooden beams of the bakery. Fariner and his family, awakened by the suffocating smoke, scrambled to escape. They climbed from their windows, terrified but alive as the fire tightened its grip on their home. The alarm was raised, church bells tolled, their frantic clanging a desperate call to arms, but the fire, now a raging beast, was already spreading, fueled by the tightly packed wooden houses of 17th century London. London, in 1666, was a city ripe for disaster. Its houses, many centuries old, were built with timber frames and thatched roofs. The streets, narrow and winding, were choked with merchants, artisans and their wares, leaving little room for fire breaks. The summer of 1666 had been unusually hot and dry, baking the city's wooden structures to a tinder-like state. The fire, after consuming Fariner's bakery, leapt across Pudding Lane, its fiery fingers seeking new fuel. It found plenty. Houses ignited one after another like dominoes falling in a deadly chain reaction. The wind, blowing from the east that night, whipped the flames into a frenzy, driving the fire westward with terrifying speed. The fire roared through the heart of the city. It consumed everything in its path, homes, shops, warehouses, all vanishing into the inferno. The heat was intense, melting pewter and glass, turning iron red hot. The air itself seemed to burn, thick with smoke and flying embers. The citizens of London fought back against the inferno with the limited means at their disposal. They formed human chains, passing buckets of water from hand to hand, desperately trying to douse the flames. But their efforts, though valiant, were utterly inadequate against the sheer scale of the disaster. The city's fire engines, primitive by modern standards, proved largely ineffective. Their leather hoses were prone to bursting under the intense heat, and they lacked the reach to combat the fire at its source. Desperation bred drastic measures. Sir Thomas Bloodworth, the Lord Mayor, initially hesitant to act decisively, finally authorised the pulling down of houses to create fire breaks. However, precious time has been lost. The fire, now a raging inferno, jumped the gaps with ease, rendering their efforts futile. For 4 long days and nights, the Great Fire raged through London. By the time it was finally extinguished, the city lay in ruins. Over 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches and countless other buildings had been reduced to ashes. Among the casualties were some of London's most iconic landmarks. St. Cathedral, its magnificent spire, a symbol of London's skyline, was gutted by the fire. Its lead roof melted, cascading down the sides of the building like molten silver. The Guildhall, the Royal Exchange, and even the medieval city gates all fell victim to the inferno. The destruction was absolute. Where once there had been bustling streets and vibrant neighborhoods, now there was only a smoldering wasteland, stretching as far as the eye could see. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the stench of death. The Great Fire left a human toll as devastating as its physical destruction. Over 70,000 of London's 80,000 inhabitants were left homeless. Families were torn apart, their homes and possessions gone. The streets were thronged with refugees, their faces etched with fear and despair. Many fled to the open fields surrounding the city, seeking refuge in makeshift camps. Others sought shelter in the ruins of churches and public buildings, their only possessions the clothes on their backs. The threat of starvation loomed large as food and water became scarce and exorbitantly priced. Yet even amidst the devastation, the spirit of London refused to be extinguished. Acts of kindness and resilience became beacons of hope. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing what little food and shelter they had. The rebuilding, though a daunting task, began almost immediately, fueled by a collective determination to overcome the disaster. By Tuesday, September 5th, the fire's relentless advance had begun to slow. The wind, which had fanned the flames with such ferocity, finally abated. Exhausted firefighters, many having fought the blaze for days without respite, continued to battle the remaining pockets of fire with grim determination. Then, as if by divine intervention, rain began to fall on the smoldering city. At first, it was just a drizzle, but it soon intensified into a steady downpour. The rain, a blessing from the heavens, helped to finally quench the flames, extinguishing the last remnants of the Great Fire. With the fire finally subdued, the true scale of the disaster became appallingly clear. London, once a thriving metropolis, was now a desolate wasteland of ash and rubble. But from the ashes, a new spirit of resilience and determination began to emerge. London would rise again, stronger and more vibrant than ever before.